Hello, and welcome to this session on software assurance. My name is Rich Gibbons, and it's my pleasure to take you through these slides. They support the module with the same name in the Microsoft Licensing Solution Specialist accreditation at getlicensingready.com, and if you need reference materials, you'll find handouts at this site as well. Let's take a look at what we're going to cover in this session. We're going to start with an introduction to software assurance, and we'll look at all of the different benefits that are available in overview mode, and then we'll look at how customers acquire software assurance, and having done that, how they go about managing all of the different benefits. Then the main part of the session will take us through the SA benefits in a bit more detail, and you can see that we're going to split them into 4 main areas, and look at benefits that help customers in each of these areas. If you have a look at the slide here, you can see a long list of the SA benefits, and there are today many benefits. Looking at the top of the list, you see new version rights, perhaps the oldest and most well known of the software assurance benefits. It allows customers to use the latest version of the product that they've got software assurance for. But today there are many more benefits, as you can see. And at the beginning of the presentation, I said there are handouts at the getlicensingready.com site, and I'd recommend the SA handout. It gives you a list of all these benefits, and also a one-liner as to what each of them are. So rather than remembering all of the detail, that handout is a great resource for you. But how do customers acquire software assurance? I like this slide. I think it shows a good overview of all the different licensing programs that there are, and shows you whether software assurance is a mandatory part of the program or whether it's optional for customers. You can see all of the different volume licensing programs here, and where you see software assurance inside a circle, you can see it's an included part of the program. Where it's not in a circle, it's an optional part. Let's focus on the newest member of the volume licensing agreements family. You can see the MPSA there, the Microsoft Products and Services Agreement. And this was launched back in December 2013, and in September 2014, software assurance was introduced to it. So you can see it's a transactional program aimed at customers wanting to purchase probably about 250 or more licenses. They can buy both on-premises licenses and online services, and software assurance is an optional purchase. You can see as well all of the other programs there and how they fit together. So when customers buy software assurance, dependent on the program that they're buying their licenses from, they can opt to include software assurance if they need to. There are a couple of volume licensing portals that you should know about, and these are important because customers go here to manage their licenses. You can see that there are 2 sides to my screen. On the right hand side I've got the VLSC, the Volume Licensing Service Center, and this supports all of the volume licensing programs apart from the new MPSA, and the MPSA is managed by the 2 portals that you see on the left hand side. There's a portal for partners, the MVLPC or Microsoft Volume Licensing Partner Center, and a portal for customers, the MBC or Microsoft Business Center. The idea of these portals is that customers can use them to manage their benefits, to see how the benefits have been allocated, and to work with them on a daily basis. So a reminder, MPSA is managed through the MVLPC and MBC, and then for all the other agreements, VLSC would be the portal to use there. So that was our quick introduction to software assurance. It's now time to get into some detail on the benefits, and I've split the benefits into 4 main areas so we can consider, as customers go about different tasks in their organisation, which software assurance benefits are of most relevance to them at that point. And you can see our areas are going to be desktop deployment, support and training, server deployment, and then the whole topic of virtualization. We'll start with some of the desktop deployment benefits, and in this section, as I say, I want to show you all of the benefits that would support a project within a customer that was about deploying desktops. The first software assurance benefit we'll look at in this section is the Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack, or MDOP. You can see from the slide that MDOP is a suite of technologies, and there are 5 different components. These technologies help customers in a variety of ways with their desktop deployment. It could be to help personalize the user experience, to simplify the application deployment, or even to improve application compatibility with the Windows operating system. There is some management capability as well, and this will help customers manage and secure devices, and the features at the end are to remove challenges associated with troubleshooting and repairing system failures. MDOP itself is a subscription, and it's available for customers who've got software assurance for Windows. In a change with Windows 10, MDOP is now an SA benefit in itself. You can see the subscription provides access to use all of the products and any updates. But of course, the usage does end when the subscription ends. Customers with MDOP can transfer that to an alternative machine, and the applications that you might deploy using products like Application Virtualization, AppV, continue to follow their existing licensing model when they're virtualized. The next benefit we'll look at is an option for deploying Windows. It's called Windows to Go. And what you can see here are 3 users sitting within their offices using devices that are owned by the organisation. And we know that they're owned by the organisation because they have asset tags on them. I've licensed all these devices with Windows and software assurance. And one of the benefits I get is Windows to Go. But we're also going to see on this slide how another SA benefit, roaming rights, comes into play. Windows to Go is about deploying corporate desktops via USB sticks, and you can see here each user has been given their own USB stick, and when they use it in the device at which they're sitting, then their desktop is delivered to them. And as I said, the rights to deliver Windows in that way are a software assurance benefit. Let's consider now our end user, the user at the end, goes away, perhaps on holiday. Is this user licensed to move across and use their own USB stick in that device? Well, yes, they are. The software assurance is attached to the device, and so because that device is already licensed with software assurance, this user is okay to go and sit at that machine and use her desktop there. What about outside the organisation? Well, let's take the middle user and send him home. If he decides to take his USB stick with him and use his desktop at home, is that allowed? Well, you may have seen the software assurance rotating as I've been going around this slide, and that indicates that the rights we're seeing are included in the license at the top there. In fact, this is the roaming rights. And what roaming rights say is that as long as that user in blue is the primary user of a device with Windows SA, he's covered not only on that licensed device, as we saw with the green user, but he's also covered to go to any device outside of his corporate premises and use his desktop on there. So we've seen he went home, he used his own home machine, but equally he could go to a friend's house, take his USB stick with him, and he would be licensed to use his desktop on that device. And this is all a right of the SA license that is attached to his primary work device that the organisation has bought for him. Another benefit, a very popular benefit, is the Home Use Programme. The Home Use Programme is all about allowing users to run the desktop application products at home. So if an organisation has active software assurance on qualifying desktop applications products, which I'll show you on the next slide, then HUP, or Home Use Programme licenses, can be purchased by the users to install those desktop applications on their home devices. Now obviously the users are installing things on their own devices, and note the second to last bullet point there. Organisations are not responsible for their individual employees' compliance with the Home Use Programme end user license terms. Usage must end if the software assurance isn't maintained, but it is the user who is considered responsible rather than the organisation. Here's a list of the qualifying products and the home use program licenses that a user could purchase. You can find this list in the product terms. You can see here that if an organisation has bought Office Standard licenses with software assurance, then the users can buy the Office Professional Plus 2016 home use program licenses for installation of the applications on their home devices. Another benefit which we'll look at is the Windows 10 virtualization rights, and this is the rights to run Windows 10 Enterprise in up to 4 virtual machines. So if an organisation has purchased Windows 10 Enterprise licenses with software assurance, then they're allowed to deploy Windows locally to that device, of course, but they're also allowed to run Windows 10 Enterprise in virtual machines on that device. I wouldn't say this is a benefit that your average user would use, but for development and test, this can be invaluable. Having a whole set of different virtual machines to model different environments is really very useful. So those were some of the desktop deployment benefits I wanted to share with you. Let's move on now to the support and training benefits that will be of interest to customers. One of the most popular and well-known benefits in this section is training vouchers. These allow an organisation to get technical training from Microsoft Certified Partners for Learning Solutions. Now, have a look at how the process works. I'll take the VLSC first. The first thing to do is the customer activates the benefit, and then they can create a training voucher. And the way they do that is they supply the trainee name and select the number of days that they want the voucher to be for. They'll see how many days are available to them in VLSC. And then the attendee receives an email, and that email will have a list of all the training companies with which they can spend the voucher. Now have a look at point 4. Vouchers remain valid for 180 days after creation if they've been reserved with a training company, even if the SA has expired. So these vouchers will remain after the end of term, even if the customer doesn't renew their software assurance. As long as they've created the vouchers and reserved them, then they can continue to use them. But what about the MPSA? So the MPSA, we know, doesn't use VLSC, it uses MBC. And a point to note, one of the great new things about software assurance in the MPSA is that the SA benefits are easier to administer. And one of the benefits here you can see, for example, is that training vouchers don't need to be activated. There are lots of benefits that need to be activated in the VLSC, and that's been removed with the MPSA, and therefore for customers who administer their benefits through MBC. E-learning is another popular benefit, and in the same way that training vouchers are for technical training, e-learning is for technical training, but also for end-user training. So what happens is, training courses are made available through the e-learning portal that correspond to the licenses for which SA has been purchased, and the number of allowable users corresponds to the number of software assurance covered licenses. And what you'll find is that there are different courses available which correspond to the different product pools, and the applications and systems content is actually available for importing into a customer's learning management system. That could be run on premises as opposed to running it through the Microsoft portals online. Another very useful benefit is the 24/7 problem resolution support benefit, and you can see that support is offered in 2 ways, over the phone or via the web. I'm going to start with the web-based incidents, and here you can see incidents can be submitted for server software as long as it is covered with software assurance on an as-needed basis. And the point here is made that software assurance is required for both server software and any related CALs. So any products licensed with the server and CAL licensing model, all server and CAL licenses need to be covered with software assurance. For the phone support incidents, there will be a complimentary incident awarded for server coverage, so for servers covered with software assurance, and then additional incidents are awarded for the spend on software assurance according to a particular table, and you can find that table in the product terms. That's been quite complicated to understand in the past, and one of the big new benefits for the MPSA is that there is now a point system calculation for this benefit. So rather than the amount of money you spend, it's the licenses and associated points that go towards giving you an allocation for the phone support incidents. Here we have System Center Global Service Monitor. This is a cloud-based service that gives organizations an easier way to monitor their web-based applications around the world. Its integration with System Center Operations Manager helps make it familiar to administer, and you can see that it does require installation of System Center 2012 Operations Manager. Customer Source is a benefit that is specific to the Microsoft Dynamics products. What is it? Well, the Customer Source portal is an online source of training courses and support resources for customers, aimed at helping people who use the Dynamics products to become more productive in their roles. Let's move on to our next section. This is all around server deployment. So we've looked at desktop deployment and some of the benefits that would be really useful in projects of that nature. We've looked at support and training. So now let's turn our attention to a project that might involve deploying either application or server operating system servers. Planning services benefits are very useful at the planning stage of a deployment. If you have a think about how an organisation deploys a product, they would consider the business benefits of deploying that product, and then there would be some planning as to exactly how the deployment is going to take place. After that planning phase, there would then be the deployment phase. And if you have a think about the benefits that support that, it's the planning services benefit that supports that initial phase, and then a benefit we've already looked at, the training vouchers, that would train the technical staff to execute on a plan. The planning services benefits, and you can see there are lots and lots of them here, are spent, if you like, with partners, and you contact a partner for a particular service, and you can see the second to last bullet point there. There's a number of different lengths of engagements available, so you consult with a partner and the services result in a deployment plan, and that's the plan that your technical team would then execute against to deploy these products. In terms of the number of planning services that you get, it's based on spend for Office applications and server licenses. And you can see some examples there. But again, this is different for the MPSA. It's easier in the MPSA. There's the same point system calculation that we've talked about earlier, and it makes it easier to understand how the allocations have been worked out, and it's consistent with the other benefits. If a customer wants more planning services days, then there is a conversion that can be done. And if they've got unused training vouchers, then they can convert those on a 3-to-1 basis into planning services days. So 3 training vouchers gives an additional planning services day. But again, another exception for the MPSA. This isn't currently available under the MPSA. So you can't convert training vouchers to planning services under the MPSA just yet. The next benefit I want to look at is disaster recovery rights. And if you have a look at the requirements, you can see that this is a benefit that relates to server products, and both servers and all related CALs have to be covered with software assurance to make this benefit available. What is the benefit? Well, have a look at the description. It gives, in effect, a second server license under which the same product can be deployed on a cold backup server solely for disaster recovery purposes. So a cold backup server is important. That's a server that is turned off. So essentially you can have a second server which has the product ready to go on it. It's installed, but it's not turned on and working. If the first server fails, then you don't need an additional license to cover that second server. There are some rules about how often you're allowed to have that server turned on in terms of maintenance and what have you, and you can find those in the product terms document. Another benefit that helps with business continuity is this: the rights to failover servers. As you can see, when a server license is covered with software assurance, this gives you the right to install a second copy of the server software on a passive server, without needing to purchase a second license. A passive server remains inactive until it takes over from the primary server, usually due to hardware failure. The passive server cannot have more processors or cores than the primary server that it supports, and the SA rights only cover one passive server. If there are further passive servers, they will require licensing. When the failover server is active, you need to license it in the usual way, so you may choose not to buy SA on the main server if you don't want to. Step-up licenses are a really useful benefit, and you can see that the first line tells us what these are. It's a way for customers to migrate from a lower level edition of a product to a higher level. So let's have a look at the table at the bottom. This is taken from the product terms, and have a look down until we see Exchange Server. This says that a customer with Exchange Server Standard can step up to Exchange Server Enterprise. And the way it works, if you have software assurance, then you're allowed to move from one edition to the other at just the difference in cost. Let me explain more. If a customer has bought Exchange Server Standard with software assurance, it costs a certain amount. If they were to then ignore that license and buy a new Exchange Server Enterprise license with software assurance, it would cost a lot more. What a step-up license does is they keep their existing license and they just pay the difference in price, and they in effect get the higher edition available to them. Do have a look at the second point though. The customer's right to the use of software under a step-up license is conditional on them having and retaining a license for the qualifying product. So the customer needs to continue to have the standard edition because the step-up license is dependent on it. At renewal, the customer can renew to the higher level. So during the term of the agreement, the customer would have the standard edition and the step-up license, and when they come to renew, if the Enterprise Edition is absolutely what they need, they would then renew directly into the Enterprise Edition. The self-hosting use rights benefit is aimed at ISVs, independent software vendors, who want to provide access to their own software as a hosted service. This software will be a solution that they have developed, known as a qualified unified solution. And there are some requirements which need to be met before this SA benefit can be used and they can let customers access the solution in a hosted environment. The main thing is that the solution must add significant functionality to the underlying Microsoft products. So if the solution is built on SharePoint Server, it might be a customized document management or content management solution, it must provide features for the customer over and above the standard SharePoint functionality. Other requirements mandate that the solution must be delivered over the internet, and that the ISV must be the sole point of contact. And the last point means that the extra functionality that forms the unified solution must be the intellectual property of the ISV, rather than being licensed from another organisation. You can see here on the slide that licenses are still acquired through traditional volume licensing agreements, where of course active software assurance is required, and, quite excitingly, these unified solutions can now be deployed on shared servers. This gives an ISV the opportunity to either run the unified solution on their own servers, or to make use of a service provider's shared servers, a flexibility that only arrived in 2016. Our final section is going to be all about virtualization, and this is both desktop virtualization and server virtualization, and it's a growing area of software assurance benefits with some really useful benefits in here. The first benefit is to enable a virtual desktop infrastructure, or VDI, and we're going to see that this has a number of benefits associated with it. Let's take a look at how a VDI works, and you can see that all of these users are in the corporate premises, they're using devices owned by the organisation, and as they connect to a server, that server deploys a VDI desktop to them. You can see it's a personal desktop. They've all got their own colours there, and that indicates, although they've come from the server, they are individual desktops. How is this licensed? Well, it's licensed with software assurance. And software assurance on Windows gives a particular benefit called virtual desktop access. And you'll see that in this section we're going to look at virtual desktop access and roaming rights. So if an organisation wants to deploy desktops in this way, technically it's called a virtual desktop infrastructure, but the rights to do this are virtual desktop access, and that's an SA benefit of Windows. So in other words, if a customer buys a Windows license without software assurance, they wouldn't have the right to deploy Windows in this way. Have a look at the machines that these users are using. I've just put the word primary on there to indicate that the users are the primary users of these devices, and this is going to be important as we go through. As we've seen before, as our users go home, because they're using devices that are outside the corporate premises and are owned by them, the software assurance on that device at the top there covers that as well, and that's called roaming rights. You can see here our user has gone home and is using her own devices, but equally, if she goes off to an internet cafe, then that follows the same rules. It's a device not owned by the business, used outside the corporate premises. It qualifies for roaming use rights, so she's able to access her desktop from there as well. So from a desktop virtualization point of view, VDI is important, and the rights to access that are the two important ones at the top there, and they're included in software assurance for Windows. Another SA benefit is the ability to purchase the Windows SA per user add-on. This license can be assigned to users who are the primary users of devices that are licensed with existing per device licenses for Windows SA and Windows VDA, and it usifies the licensing, meaning the primary user of the existing device can now access Windows 10 VDI and Windows To Go from any device. They are also able to locally install Windows Enterprise on any Windows 7 or above Pro or Enterprise device, or any Windows tablet that measures 10.1 inches or less. Another option organisations have is something called Windows Thin PC, and you can see here there's a nice summary of that. The main benefit is that Windows Thin PC allows organisations to evaluate thin client computing, a VDI infrastructure, without having to invest in any different hardware. So it's allowing an organisation to repurpose existing devices as thin clients using a particular version of Windows 7. So if you're interested in desktop virtualization, VDI is important, but this is often a really good way when you're evaluating that sort of infrastructure. But let's move now to the server side. There are a couple of benefits I want to talk about software assurance wise within server virtualization, and the first one I want to talk about is called license mobility across server farms. Let me explain the diagram that you're seeing here. There's a physical server at the front there, and there are two virtual servers, and at the moment they're both running SQL. And I've bought a license in effect for each virtual server, so I can run SQL within those virtual machines. I need some more physical servers, so I'm just going to tidy up my diagram, and this shows exactly the same thing. It shows the two SQL virtual machines with the licenses assigned to them. So let's get some more servers in this server farm, and what we're going to have a look at within a server farm, one of the great things you can do with virtualization is to allow virtual servers to move between different physical hosts. There are lots of reasons for doing that. It could be load balancing, or a particular server fails and you need to move the workloads, and these are all benefits of using virtualization. But we need to look at it from a licensing perspective. The first thing I'm going to do is move the licenses to the physical server. This is actually how the licensing works. Licenses are always assigned to a physical device, and then they give rights to run virtual machines. So if I'm taking something like SQL Server license with Server Cal, then if I assign 2 licenses to the device, as I have done here, it gives me rights to run 2 virtual machines, so I'm completely compliant. Time goes on, and while the servers probably don't dance about in quite as an exciting way as this in real life, you can see that this is simulating that workloads are moving. And at this point in time, we need to be able to prove that we are correctly licensed. Now, we're not correctly licensed because there are no licenses associated with that end server. Can I move the licenses from the first server across? Well, I could, but only every 90 days. And that's not a very flexible solution, I think you'll agree. And those licenses are said to not have license mobility at the moment. And because they don't, what it would mean is I would have to buy 2 licenses for that end machine. But also 2 licenses for the middle machine, because of course those 2 virtual servers could end up on any of the devices, and they all need to be correctly licensed. Now this sounds a little expensive, and it's obviously not the way to go. The way to go is to buy licenses with software assurance. And software assurance gives the benefit with the name at the top of the slide: license mobility across server farms. And license mobility means the licenses can move between servers as often as required. And so you can think of the licenses now as being attached to the virtual machines because, and this doesn't really happen, but as you can imagine, as the virtual machines fly around, the licenses are allowed to follow them. So that's license mobility across server farms. It removes the 90-day restriction. It allows the free movement of virtual machines, which is obviously possible from a technical point of view, but allows the licenses to follow those virtual machines. There's another license mobility benefit, and it's called license mobility through SA. And this slide compares the 2 license mobility benefits. So if we recap on the one we've just seen, within our server farm, we know that we're allowed to move the license to whichever server we want as often as we want, because we've got software assurance. And this license mobility through SA is extending that concept outside of our server farm. And you can see a cloud there with some servers, and this could be a service provider's server farm, or it could be Azure. What this SA benefit allows you to do is to license a virtual machine on third-party hardware. And more importantly, these can be shared servers. For example, in Azure, each physical server is shared with lots of other people, and this licensing SA benefit allows you to take your licenses to shared third-party hardware and run the software in virtual machines on there. So license mobility across server farms is the bottom license mobility benefit. License mobility through software assurance is the assigning of licenses to shared third-party servers shown at the top. Another SA benefit is unlimited virtualization. Unlimited virtualization is useful when organizations have a large or unknown number of virtual machines that they want to run. And licensing for unlimited virtualization means that from a compliance perspective, it's very simple to make sure that you're compliant at all times. This is how it works. If you license completely at the physical level, with certain products' enterprise core licenses, with software assurance, then you can run unlimited virtual machines for these products. What are the products? There's only 2, SQL Server 2016 and BizTalk Server 2013 R2. Both of these products allow unlimited virtualization, but only for the Enterprise Edition licenses, which are available in the core licensing model. In the core licensing model, you need to count all of the cores on a server and buy a license for each of those. And you can see here I've done that. I've got 8 cores, I've bought 8 licenses, and adding software assurance gives you unlimited virtualization. So as I say, only available for those 2 products, and as long as you're licensed completely at the physical level with software assurance, then you get unlimited virtualization. The final SA benefit to discuss is the Azure Hybrid Use benefit. This allows organizations with Windows Server licenses with SA to use their on-premises licenses to cover virtual machines in Azure, and pay only for the compute power of the VM, thus reducing the cost of moving to the cloud. How does this work? Well, for each Windows Server 2 processor license with software assurance, customers may run 2 virtual machines with up to 8 cores each, or 1 virtual machine with up to 16 cores. Another thing that is important to note is that while the number of virtual machines available to run is the same for Windows Server Standard and Data Center, there is one difference. The rights with Windows Server Standard are alternative, meaning the licenses can be used on-premises or in Azure, while the rights with Windows Server Data Center are additive, meaning the licenses can be used on-premises and in Azure simultaneously. So as you can see here, we can move 2 of the VMs from that first server into Azure, but because this is licensed with Windows Server Standard, which gives alternative rights, meaning it can cover VMs that are on-premises or in the cloud, you'll see that the license is effectively assigned to the Azure cloud. Now, when we move VMs from the third server, you'll see that the licenses stay where they are on the physical server, and that's because those rights are additive, meaning that Windows Server Data Center can cover VMs that are on-premises and in the cloud. That brings us to the end of this session on software assurance. I hope you're now going to go and do the associated exam. If you're going to do the exam, my tip to you would be to download the handout associated with this module and have that to hand as you take the exam. I wish you the very best of luck, and I'll talk to you again soon.